Okay, on to part 3 of Notes for the New Gamer. So in the first couple of parts, we talked about trying to save your money and trying to make wise decisions and so forth. And so I thought that for the third part, what I would do is actually do a bit of comparisons with some of the tabletop games that I've played. So I've got my student in conflict here, who's got his own little book, and he's going to be checking things out. Now, take this video and the information within it with a grain of salt. This is one biased opinion, and I admit that it's biased because right now I'm a Malifaux player more than anything, and I give my reasoning there. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt. Malifaux is the game I've been playing, and so let's just compare the systems. So anyway, let's get into the 5 games that I'm going to compare. And this is an exercise I think that a new gamer should do, even though I know this is difficult. The way rules and systems and player experience and personal bias are going to come into play. So I'll give you what I've got, and hopefully this might help somebody. So starting with Warhammer 40K, this is the system that I started it in, and the system that I think a lot of tabletop hobbyists start in. I will say that this is a fairly good system for the beginner. Most of the things that you're going to learn in the tabletop hobby can be learned by playing 40K. The rule systems are a little fairly straightforward. They're fairly easy to grasp. The painting and modeling side of it, you get to learn a lot of different the basic techniques for painting and modeling. Just painting up the Warhammer 40K miniatures. You've got GW stores and access to GW stores that hold clinics for painting or for playing. So you've got that level of support. Not a lot of direct support other than popping into their store or buying product. And the last pro for 40K is I believe still the most popular game out there. It's a very, very active community. This is the type of game where you could pop in, play a pickup game with a complete stranger. I've played Warhammer 40K in 5 or 6 different states, just walking in with an army and playing it that way. Let's talk about the bad thing real quick for 40K. 40K is painfully expensive. This game will hurt your wallet in the worst way possible. It gets very expensive to play this game. The painting modeling while easy is repetitive, and it can get really boring after you paint that 150th 150th Marine or Orc or whatever. And the other thing is for veterans anyways, a lot of us, myself included here, feel that the game has lost quite a bit in terms of its flavor, in terms of certain armies. So while the rules are very straightforward and things are standardized, a lot of the flavor, at least to veterans, feels like it's been sucked out of the game. Finally, one last note on 40K: change gets expensive. 40K is on the verge of releasing its now 6th edition, and from somebody that's played since Rogue Trader a little bit, and mainly 2nd through 5th, I will tell you that every main rules change has become more and more expensive as prices have gone up, model count has gone up, and so this game can get very expensive in a hurry. Probably the second most popular tabletop game out right now is War Machine. War Machine is sort of, a lot of people would say that this is kind of the next step for a tabletop gamer. I don't quite agree with that, but I can see the reasoning behind it. Some of the pros to War Machine: very solid game mechanics. This isn't just a you walk X amount and you fire X amount, kind of the way 40K can feel. This game requires some planning. It requires a high amount of player skill. The models are okay. They're compared to some of the other games we're going to compare, they're a little easier to paint. Fairly popular game. It's got a lot of grassroots support, so you can have a reasonably good shot at walking into a independent hobby store and getting in a game. And a highly active tournament scene. So the War Machine, to me, is a much more competitive, much more skill-based game than 40K. And that comes with a price. Some of the criticisms I will make about War Machine is that it's such a highly competitive and skill-based game that this can be a very tough ride for beginners because of the fact that the game system itself encourages really competitive gaming and aggressive gameplay. A timid beginner may have a very, very rough time with War Machine. Unfortunately, if you're not a competitive player, you will have a higher likelihood of running into more competitive players playing War Machine. And if that's not your thing, and you don't want to argue or rules lawyer, or play with a guy that's really just out to pound your face in, and that's not your cup of tea, that might be a con for War Machine. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, I'm not really a huge fan of the models. I think they're okay. There are some nice ones in there, but when you look at the entire range, I don't think it quite stacks up to GW or Weird. And then finally, War Machine, while built as a skirmish game, and still cheaper than 40K, not as cheap as it once was. So War Machine is kind of moving up in scale. Some of the prices have bumped quite a bit, and so this game is becoming more expensive these days. Warhammer Fantasy is another GW game. So this game, though, is considered the tougher, more strategic game versus 40K. So 40K people will agree that, hey, that's kind of the entry point to a lot of these types of games. Fantasy maybe being another step where it's a little more strategic. Fantasy models are incredible. I have a high elf army, and unfortunately I haven't played more than maybe a dozen games, but I love the models for my high elf army and still enjoy painting them. It's easier to learn these days than it used to be, so you're not bogged down in heavy magic phases or some of the major exceptions that you used to have. And finally, very rich, very entertaining fluff for fantasy. This has been out for more than 20 years now, and the fluff is just great for this game. The bad side kind of suffers some of the same hindrances that 40K does. Incredibly expensive hobby. You have to run a very high model count, and you have to paint the same miniature over and over and over again. So if you're not really into that, that can be a pain. Modeling is a little bit more challenging than it is in 40K. And then with the same direction that 40K has gone, a lot of people would believe that fantasy has gone that way. It's kind of lost. Some people will say it's kind of lost its strategic edge. There's a lot more randomness involved in it, and a lot more rigidity at the same time. So you've got randomness with important game mechanics like movement. You've got rigidity with other types of mechanics as well. Finally, fantasy, not nearly as popular as the other two games, so this is a little bit harder to find regular games with playing Warhammer Fantasy. This is kind of an ugly cover, but we're talking about Blood Bowl here. Now, Blood Bowl is one of those games that I consider still my favorite GW game. GW does not consider it one of their favorite games. This game has kind of fallen by the wayside officially with GW, even though they still manufacture some of the Blood Bowl stuff. Now, the pros to Blood Bowl. Probably the cheapest game system I'm going to review here, mainly because of the fact that the rules are free, the rosters are free, and this game offers the most freedom of the games I'm reviewing as far as what miniatures you want to use. You can literally go out and buy any miniature and say that's going to be a Blood Bowl miniature. And that just blows it wide open as far as how nice you want your Blood Bowl team to be, and what kind of pieces you want to include. So this game is great for modelers and painters, has a very active league and world competition scene. So this game is, I would say it's somewhat popular, but you kind of have to find a league. Now, that is a good and a bad thing. So part of the cons is, this is not the type of game where you could walk into a store and hope to pick up and play. First of all, they may not let you in a GW to play Blood Bowl. That's actually, that can happen, especially if you're not using official GW miniatures. Secondly, Blood Bowl players are often grouped up in leagues. That's the main strength of the game, is your team progresses. So you're going to want to get into a league, and sometimes if you're, if you live in a remote area, that can be tough. And a lot of the other cons just go on with just poor manufacturing support. GW doesn't make any new models for Blood Bowl, and a lot of times they restrict Blood Bowl's very vocal fan base from doing some of the things that they want to do with the game. It's really just a grassroots fan base held up game, but in my opinion, very fun game. Awesome game if you can get a league going, or if you can get out to some of the major tournaments and play that game. It gets competitive, but at the same time very fun. And basic, simple game to learn, difficult to master. Very good game. Finally, we're going to review Malifaux. And I'm running a little bit late here. Malifaux, the good side to this game, amazing miniatures, solid gameplay with the card dueling mechanic. I thought I would hate it because I don't like playing cards. I'm more of a dice guy. I like to play craps when I go to the casino. Solid fluff, great writing for Malifaux. And of all the games, this is the most objective-based game. So this game above all of the other games isn't just about killing the other guy or killing their warcaster or whatever. Malifaux, you can focus in on objectives, and you can play for objectives, and it's not always the inevitable smash and bang the way some of those other games are. Also, one of the cheapest games of the games I'm reviewing, maybe second to Blood Bowl, but really, is this a game that you can play on the cheap and very portable. Now, the cons for Malifaux, a little harder to find games than the other games, but than say 40K or War Machine, but on the rise. So hopefully, some of us henchmen, let's go henchmen, myself being one, we can start getting more games in many areas. Painting and modeling is amazing for this game, but also challenging. Not quite the kind of stuff that a beginner can just jump into with both feet. Need a little bit of guidance there. And then finally, gameplay, as fun as it is, as easy as it is to learn, but very difficult to master, it can reach very complex levels. So, if you're in for a little bit more mindless fun, this might not be the game for you. On the deeper levels, because this game can get very complex. So that's it for this video, and I ran way over. So I guess that's it, and I will see you next time.